Welcome, everyone. My name is Laurel Harris. I am the green captain for Broadway's Jagged Little Pill, and I am so incredibly excited to be here with all of you because we are interviewing two incredibly wonderful, inspiring human beings of this planet who have already done so much for climate change and just continue to lead the force. I want to thank Broadway Green Alliance for creating this panel and just being so instrumental in helping to facilitate this entire Earth Day initiative. So check out Broadway Green Alliance again and get to know their work because they are doing incredibly important and vital things. So I am happy to join the Earth Day 2021 virtual stage with Earth Day Initiative and March for Science NYC. Now, we are going to be talking to Christiana Figueres, who was the UN climate chief for the creation of the Paris Agreement, and Tom Rivett-Carnac, who was the chief political strategist for the Paris Agreement at the UNFCCC. They also co-authored the book, The Future We Choose, The Stubborn Optimist Guide to the Climate Crisis. Welcome, you two. Thank you so much for being here. We are just so thrilled to have you all.
Well, thank you, Laurel. We're also equally excited to be here with you. Thanks so much.
Delighted to be
here. Of course. Thank you. We were commenting on how much we love the plants in all of our backgrounds. So clearly it makes its way into the home as well. We love the earth all around, all facets. So Christiana, my first question is for you. So first off, can you explain what exactly the Paris Climate Agreement is and why it's so important? I think a lot of people, some people in particular, have a vague understanding of it and what it means exactly, but could really benefit from hearing straight from you just what it is and why it's important.
Yeah, thanks, Laurel. So the Paris Agreement that was adopted unanimously by all governments of the world in 2015. We know that the US then temporarily withdrew and came back, but it was adopted universally. And it can be understood as a universal pathway that involves all countries and all stakeholders. It is a pathway for the evolution of national and for the whole global economy toward carbon neutrality by 2050. What that means is that by 2050, science demands that we can only emit as many greenhouse gases as we can actually absorb naturally. And the other piece that's important to understand about the Paris Agreement is that there is progressive touch points every 5 years in which governments come together every 5 years and report on how much they have done with respect to what they registered before, and then they inform each other how much more they will do over the next 5 to 10 years. So it is an agreed pathway with every 5-year touch points because we understand that the decarbonization cannot happen overnight. It has to happen over a certain period of time.
Wow, yes, thank you so much. 2050 is not far away, so important to have that accountability and to really just do this as, globally as possible. So thank you for explaining that. Tom, in the book that you co-authored with Christiana, The Future We Choose, you tell the story of two possible worlds. One where we fail to meet the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement, and another where we move toward the Paris goals and toward a carbon neutral and regenerative system. And you are optimistic. In fact, you are stubbornly optimistic. What do you mean by that?
Thank you. So the first thing I would say, and this is emphasized by those two chapters that you pointed out there, is we are at an incredibly perilous moment. We have known for a long time that this moment would come, but right now we're about to discover whether we're serious about dealing with this issue with all of the implications that contains. By 2030, we either will have reduced our emissions by half, fully 50%, or we will have begun to lose control of the climatic system with all of the implications that has for us and for future generations and for the natural world. Now, most people, when you say something like that, and many people listening perhaps, have this little sort of frisson of fear when you say that. That's really frightening, right? Are we going to make it? We've left it so late. What's my life going to be like? What's my children's lives going to be like? That's entirely understandable reaction to the reality that we are facing. This is incredibly serious, and real failure is possible. However, real success is possible too. It is remarkable how the world is now waking up and pivoting to face this issue coming out of the COVID pandemic, which was an incredibly predictable public health disaster. We're now realizing that climate change is also a predictable public health disaster, and we can do something about it. And what is going to make the difference between now and 2030 is who we are and how we show up and how we meet this moment. It is an enormous privilege to be alive right now, to be able to have a bigger impact on the future of the planet than any previous generation. Do I know we're going to make it? I don't know that. What I do know is that we have a shot. So as a result of that, who do we choose to be right now? Actually, if you look back at history, at these dark, pivotal moments, people have decided that they're going to meet that uncertainty and that challenge of the future with a kind of gritty, determined, stubborn optimism. They will refuse to decide that the future, that it's impossible to meet the challenges of the future. That is what is required of us right now. With that determination to come together, to face this moment, to do what is necessary, that's the energy, that's the courage. We call it stubborn optimism. Other people call it courage, motivation, whatever works. We've got to show up with everything we've got right now, because this is it. This 10 years, we can still do this, but only if we exhibit those qualities. That's what we mean by stubbornly optimistic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love that. Yes, stubbornly optimistic. That's our only choice. That's our only
it,
path
right?
forward.
This is it. Yeah.
So we can do it. We can do it one by one. Christiana, what do we need to see this year on climate change?
Well, Tom has very helpfully already put the deadline, the immediate deadline on the table, 2030. Because although the Paris Agreement refers to 2050, the fact is that since it was adopted, scientists have actually said, well, but by 2030, you will know whether you're on a pathway to the right decarbonization by 2050 or not. So all eyes are now on 2030. What that actually means is that this year, when all governments get together at the end of the year in Glasgow, they will have to do a couple of things. They need to first report on how much they have done since the Paris Agreement. And secondly, they will have to put forward their new commitments of how much they're going to do into the near future. And the date that looms very large for everyone is 2030. So we have already seen that the European Union, for example, has already committed to 55% cut by 2030. We're expecting the United States to come in at least at 50% cut, because that is the average cut that every country has to actually do. So that is going to be the marker at the end of this year of whether countries are at least intending and have plans backed by regulations and legislation where that is possible to be at this 50% cut by 2030. On the side of that, what is very exciting is what is happening in addition to in geopolitics. It's very exciting what is happening in the real economy, because we already see huge progress in the installation of renewable energy that is not emitting. We see huge progress in the electrification of light transport. We see enormous progress in the shifting of capital around the world that is shifting away from high carbon assets that are very, very risky over to low carbon, clean technologies that is a much better investment. So the real economy is moving forward and needs to continue to catapult itself forward this year. But also at the end of the year is the deadline for governments to come forward with their new, renewed and upgraded commitments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for explaining the 2030 versus the 2050, because obviously 2030 is much closer, but we will have the stubborn optimism and we are doing it. So thank you for that update. It's exciting to hear that progress is definitely happening. We have one more question for you all. I wish we could talk all day. This one is going to Tom. So how does individual action lead to systematic change? People want to feel engaged in the solutions, but also recognize that the systems have to change. So how do those two intersect, the individual and the system?
No, it's a great question, and I'm old enough to remember and to have been through a few different cycles, right, where people say for a while it's all about individual action, we need individuals to change, and then people say it's all about systemic change, then we go back to individual action. It's understandable. People are trying to find the levers that will make the change, but right now, when we've reached this most consequential of moments, we need to realize it has to be all of the above, right? So in the book, what we talk about, and we write the book for individuals, and everyone is an individual, whether they run a local community group or a country or a company, but we say there are 3 categories of action that are critical for everyone. The first is simply how we show up. We talked already about this concept of stubborn optimism. Showing up with that determination, that courage, that commitment makes a huge difference to the energy that you bring to it, the way in which you can encourage others to participate. That attitude is not additional to your contribution. It is a fundamental part of it. So first piece is how we show up. The second piece is our own personal impact. And those of us, particularly in the developed world, have a disproportionate personal footprint on the planet that can actually be quite significant. So taking time to look at that, and what we say in the book is to look at that in a slightly counterintuitive way. Even though this is an emergency, think about it as a 10-year project, or at least till 2030. We know that emissions need to reduce by half in that time period. Actually, if you think that your own emissions need to reduce in half by 2030, with a bit of planning and investment, that's enough time. It's enough time, probably most capital intensive items in your life will be changed. It's even enough time to think, do I want to change my career and do something that's more directly connected to this? One other example, Christiana and I started a podcast called Outrage and Optimism, precisely so we didn't have to get on a plane all the time to go and talk to people. Not that that's been a problem in the last year. So that second piece, our own personal footprint is important because it can be significant in and of itself, but also it makes you feel engaged in a big generational struggle rather than divorced from it. It makes you feel more engaged than like you're participating. Then the third piece is how do we engage with power? And we all touch power in different ways. We might be parents, we might be on a school board. We're also, many of us are citizens, we'll vote in most countries. We certainly vote with our money when we purchase things. We might have investments. We're employees, we're employers. Think about the places where you either touch or exert power and use those roles, use all of those roles to make your voice heard and insist that institutions shift with the speed and scale that we need them to. So how we show up, our own lives, and how we engage with power makes us feel like we're participating. It gives us energy. And with those levers, we've got the time to turn this around. Just
wonderful. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. And yes, just even being here and showing up today and being a part of this conversation, this is part of it. This is part of taking action. So we just want to thank you, oh my gosh, so much again, Tom Rivett-Carnac, Christiana Figueres. You all are just beacons of light and hope and optimism and just doing the work. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And everyone here, please check out these wonderful humans and what they're doing. The podcast that Tom mentioned, Outrage and Optimism, is a great place to start. And obviously their book, The Future We Choose, The Stubborn Optimist Guide to the Climate Crisis. But yes, we can do this. Individuals, individual change leads to big change. So little by little, we're doing it. So I just want to thank you all so much again. Thank you to the Broadway Green Alliance. And we got this. Have a great day, everyone.